So cherubs, in the late 19th century, the center of the Western art world was no doubt in Paris, the epicenter of Impressionism. Manet, Renoir, Degas, Monet. Home of the avant-garde, a term that originally referred to an advanced military troop that entered an area before the main force, but came to refer the artists who push ahead. In these years, those artists pushing ahead were the Impressionists. They were messing with the way that we saw the world, pulling away from photorealism or epic history paintings and finding inspiration in the world in front of their face. Like this painting by Monet, which plays with the way that our eyes see the world by painting a mess of blue, white, and red. We think we're seeing the French flag, but really, it's just a mess of color that gives the impression of the French flag. I wonder how those Impressionists got their name. Groups of people who appeared in these paintings will sometimes be cut off. The action will run outside the scope of the canvas. It was all very new, very exciting stuff back then. And one of those new and exciting things, one of those exciting turning points of this time period, was in the genre of painting that had idealized women, a Venus reclining under the male gaze. Sometimes that gaze, the male gaze, is baked into the content of the painting. So like if you're painting the popular biblical subject of Susanna and the elders, where the elders gaze upon Susanna, it's going to happen. Or the Judgment of Paris, where Paris judges the fairness of the three goddesses. But deeper than that, it is often presumed that the viewer of a painting is male. Like this painting of Nell Gwyn, one of Charles II's mistresses. So the one gazing at this woman is not actually in the painting, it is the viewer of the painting. It's the king. It's the painter, Peter Lely, and the male acquaintances of the king who he chooses to share it with. And most history books will tell you that the turning point in this genre of painting happens when Manet paints his Olympia in 1865 and has his reclining model, who the accompanying iconography informs us is a sex worker rather than a goddess. And she's issuing a challenge back at the viewer. But the thing is, the viewer is still assumed to be male here. But the real challenge to this genre, I think, which I don't want to call a turning point because we still very much live with the presumption of the male gaze, but a challenge to this from the Impressionists came from a female painter, an American female painter living in Paris, Mary Cassatt. In those earlier paintings, I'll defer to John Berger, who points out better than I can when he describes how a woman in these paintings appears. She must continually watch herself, and so she comes to consider the surveyor and the surveyed within her as the two constituent yet always distinct elements of her identity as a woman. How she appears to others, and ultimately how she appears to men, is of crucial importance for what is normally thought of as the success of her life. So when the woman is engaged in some activity, there is an awareness that she is being looked upon because it is how she appears to men that will define her success. When Mary Cassatt paints women, however, the focus of the image is not how the women will be perceived, but what the women are perceiving. Here we have a woman attending the opera, seemingly alone and giving her full attention to the play. She is not challenging the viewer like Manet's Olympia, or on the hunt like Sargent's Madame X. She is looking, but she's not on the hunt. This woman is fully enthralled in an intellectual activity and the appreciation of the arts in a meaningful way. And that intellectual behavior is in stark contrast to the little man in the background who uses his binoculars to stare at her. She's not a seductress, but she's also not there to be seduced. She is independent with an independent intellectual pursuit, and Cassatt asserts this by playing with the focus on perception. She looks upon the opera even as this guy, and we look upon her. And I mean, that's just cool, because it takes that impressionist idea of playing with perception, both in the use of paint, capturing a fleeting moment. I mean, that dude staring at her is really just some smudges of paint that our mind puts together in the same way that we would put together the French flags in Monet's painting. But it also plays with the tradition of depicting a female subject as an object that exists for the male gaze. And to look at another painting by her, this is a portrait of her mother. Again, we have a strong woman involved in an independent intellectual pursuit. If we do a quick survey of other women reading or in relation to the news of the day, it will quickly reveal how this painting challenges that expectation as well. News of the War in Mexico by Richard Catton Woodsville, for example, puts the newspaper at the center of the painting and marginalizes demographics by literally pushing them to the margins. The news isn't for her, it isn't for them. Or The Brown Family by Eastman Johnson illustrates the matriarch involved in some novel while her husband deals with the serious business of the news. Mary Cassatt, though, shows her mother as a thoughtful consumer of the news, even if it is no doubt filled with the male-dominated issues of business and politics. Cassatt also respects the privacy of her female protagonist by obscuring the words in that mirror that teases us with the information. Her interests are cerebral, and they're also private. They're her own, and they aren't necessarily to be looked on by whoever the viewer may be. So in both these paintings, and much of her other work, Mary Cassatt subverts a lot of the expectations of perception in a more radical way than Manet, because she is not assuming that the viewer is always male, and she is able to give her female subjects an inner world that cannot be subjugated by the male gaze, while using the tools of impressionism that focus on the way that we perceive paintings in general. So go check out some Mary Cassatt paintings, and thank you for watching.